Guys, Work here. Welcome back to Work the Trigger. So if you've watched any of our live chats or have seen any of my previous videos, you've probably caught wind of a company called Harry's Holsters. Harry's Holsters is a holster company. They are located in North Carolina, and they do things just a little bit different. So in this video, I have Harrison from Harry's Holsters here to join us to talk about his holsters, his holster designs, and actually what it's like working with me. Harrison, how's it going?
Pretty good, man. How are you?
I'm well. I am well. So that's right, everybody. I said working with me because I've been, I guess it's not really in secret, but it's not been really like,
kind of behind
the mountaintop. So to give you guys a general idea of kind of what I'm doing with Harry. So my background, my day job is CAD design, computer aided design. And so I do a lot of work on a computer, creating models, creating different things, and that gives me the ability to create a lot of different shapes and forms and be able to create workflows that maybe people who aren't trained or don't do it as a day job can't necessarily get into. So basically what it comes out to is anything this guy brainstorms, because all of these things that he's coming up with 100% from his brain, but I can end up getting them and forming them into the thing to help him make his stuff. So, Harrison, like, what was your idea behind getting a little bit of help, reaching out a little bit?
So I started doing everything myself. When I bought my first CNC, I did not know the difference between a X, Y, and Z axis. So if you don't know what that is, go look it up, and you're going to think, "Wow, this guy's an idiot." But I started with that. I learned how to use Fusion 360, which is not a CAD software, on my own using YouTube. And I got to a point where what I wanted to accomplish with making holsters was frankly getting past my skills and abilities without really diving in more than I had the time to do. And Work and I, we've been in communication, kind of knew each other for probably the past year or a little more?
Yeah, a little more, I think.
And I didn't know at first that your day job was CAD. And then I found out, and I was like, what the heck? I'll send this guy this one project, see if he's interested. And he nailed it out of the park. It was fantastic on like the first. We had to do a couple revisions, but his first, and that's due to the nature of the product itself. Mm-hmm. And work was amazing. So I started giving him some more stuff, and it's turned out pretty well so far.
That one project is actually the one I'm the most excited about, and probably the furthest down the road at this point
to bring to market by far. So.
Yeah, but that one's it's going to turn some heads for sure. So one of the reasons that I personally have agreed to work with Harrison and have put this much effort in is he's got a unique way of looking at holster designs. If you look across the kydex holder marketplace, there's not a lot of variety out there. Can you talk a little bit about what kind of got you into it in the first place, into wanting to get into this?
So initially, I used to work as a real estate agent, and doing that, I worked in an extremely non-gun friendly area. Everything was pretty much a non-permissive environment. I had one coworker who knew that I carried, or actually two, because of some insurance purposes. But if anybody outside of those two people had known, I would have been ostracized in the office. It would have been absolutely horrible. And at this time, the holster market's moved a ton in the last couple of years. This was about 4 or 5 years ago. And they didn't have all the accessories they have now as far as keeping the gun concealed, especially with wearing a suit or anything like that. And I had this idea that ended up being a horrible idea. I could not execute it for anything, but it got me studying holsters more, studying the manufacturing processes, all that. And I just started doing it, and I ended up developing a real passion for it. I never worked with my hands doing real estate. I did some construction stuff before that, but I really miss working with my hands. Doing holsters gave me an opportunity to do that. And I started seeing a lot of design areas that there were little niches in the market that were not being filled. Most people that sell holsters, a lot of the successful holster companies out there are literally just doing a basic taco or pancake design, and they don't take any attention to detail to their design. And the companies that are really successful are really good at marketing, which good on them, but they haven't looked at ways they can really improve the product.
Yeah, it seems like the holster product has become stagnant. They found something that is acceptable, and everybody just kind of rode that train. And you seem to look at these things a little bit differently. You don't look at it as this is the status quo, this is the highest bar I need to hit. You look at it and identify the issues, because let's face it, every product has issues.
Yes.
And I like where you go with identifying those issues and doing actual design work around those issues to create a product that in the end not only holds the gun but also is comfortable.
And that's the thing, like the holster market's not going to change drastically in the sense of most holsters fit within a couple of basic designs, the taco, the pancake, and there's a couple other variations, a split holster. But as far as kydex, it's really the only 3 variations. And within that, there's obviously some design detail, but for the most part, people don't really get outside of the norm. And there's a lot of little details that you can pay attention to and try to make things more comfortable. And I feel a lot of other companies on the market aren't doing that. Now there are some companies out there doing great work, but they're not necessarily the most well-known companies out there as well. So I just kind of geeked out over that stuff.
So how long did it take you to go from the standard block up an actual gun and fold kydex around it to CNC vacuum formed holsters?
I pretty much skipped the first step entirely. When I started, my timing was great as far as getting into this business. I was able to get on the vacuum forming as soon as it became like, in the holster manufacturing, you have the big boys, which have been doing their own thing and doing a certain way for years, decades. And then you have all these smaller guys that they're just figuring stuff out. And at that time, everybody was figuring out vacuum forming. The Swift press just came out, and I was able to hit the train and start vacuum forming right away, but I wasn't able to make my own molds till about a year after that. And that was a game changer. That being able to do my own design in CAD, you have too many limitations when you're using off-the-shelf molds.
Mm-hmm.
I modified them, but there was only so much I could modify with those.
Yeah, one of the key points in holsters that I always kind of look at and bring up when I'm reviewing a holster or looking at buying a holster is what I affectionately call the dick guillotine. So down at the retention point underneath the trigger guard, in between the trigger guard and the muzzle, in a lot of stock holsters, there's a relatively sharp kydex edge there. And that sharp kydex edge, especially if you're carrying an appendix, which I do, it becomes a bit of a blade as you sit down, and just where it presses against your thigh or your tender regions, it can be extremely comfortable. And you've come up with a different way to look at that. So I just, as an example as to what you've done, kind of explain a little bit on how you looked at that and what you came up with.
Well, I noticed that was an issue. I noticed that things that are rounded are always more comfortable. So you see a lot of companies out there on the market that have a good reputation, but they have that squared off pointy edge and they look really cool. It's a really sharp look, but when you're wearing it, it's also unfortunately very sharp. So I just wanted to have a nice rounded edge, and I figured why not use the kydex to do that? But to do that, as you know, there's a little more CAD work involved
Mm-hmm.
than what most people are doing. And it's not something you can do with off-the-shelf molds, unfortunately, modified off-the-shelf molds. It'd be very difficult to do that. So that's just one of the little features. I try to look for little pain points. There's little areas, and when you wear a holster for 45 minutes, it might be fine and comfortable. When you wear a holster for 3 hours, you're really going to start to see what areas become comfortable and uncomfortable. So if you're doing, like, one of my testing standards for a holster is most average drives usually about 3 to 4 hours. But when I'm testing a new design, it's going to get me in a car ride for 3 to 4 hours, or it's not going to make it to production.
The fact that I can sit down with one of your holsters for that long and have it still be comfortable is just, it's an amazing thing.
Yeah, and the whole thing with car holsters, I'll just, a PSA here. Consider this, you're probably more likely to get in a wreck than a gunfight. And if your car goes from a higher, even like 20 miles an hour to 0 pretty quick, momentum is happening. And if your gun's on a magnet or in a non-retention holster, it's going to go flying. And that could hit you, one of your kids, a loved one, a friend, somebody else. If you're an Uber driver, a passenger, whatever you have in that car, it could hit you and damage you quite a bit. So don't do a car holster. And if you do, get a Safariland holster with a hood and somehow hard mount that to the car. You need some sort of active retention holster that's better than a Serpa.
So yeah, better than a Serpa. So right now you've got 2 main holster lines out. You want to talk about those a little bit?
Yeah, so I've got the Contender, which is our OWB belt holster designed for like range use, competition, that sort of thing. You put it on a war belt, battle belt, whatever you want to call it. And then we have our Singleton line, which is our IWB lineup. The Singleton it's meant to be a very simple, minimalist holster. Before that, we made the Executive, which was a little more complicated. The idea of the Singleton is it will work really well for most people, and you don't have to put a lot of thought into how you use the holster, how you want to set it up. It just comes and it works.
Yeah, a couple of the key things about the Singleton that I just absolutely love. From you, it comes base model with the discrete carry concept monoblock clip.
Yeah.
Which is, that is one of the, in my opinion, one of the premier clips that you can get. Basically anything from discrete carry concepts is just amazing. The monoblock is just simple.
Discrete carry concepts, I think, has been around maybe 3 years or a little over 2 years, at least on the open market. And they have complete 3 years. Yeah. Been in this business longer than I thought. But when I started this, all that was available was plastic injection molded clips. And before that, guys were making clips out of kydex. So you had soft loops, the ulti clip, and then that was a couple of really cheap, crappy spring steel clips. Discrete carry concepts completely changed the game with their clips.
I think they have basically made everything else irrelevant.
Yeah.
Especially so I'm not a strut and loop fan. The difficulty of putting it on and taking it off just has always counted it out for me. The discrete carry concept, they're what are they, monoliths? Those basically do everything that the strut and loops do. They're tuckable, they can do all that stuff, and they're as strong, but they're more simple. And then the monoblock takes the place of what the standard, cheap throwaway foamy clip, which is, as I said in one of my other videos, it's the clip that everybody hands out, but nobody actually recommends, and makes that setup just a perfect bulletproof setup. And you include this clip, which is not a cheap clip, on a holster for under $50 starting price.
Yeah, and that's the goal. I want an affordable holster that is reasonable for everybody. And I'm sure there's some people that are going to watch this get $50 for a holster. That's insane. Most of the holsters I bought and carried before I started making holsters, $100. That usually was the cheap end of what I'd carry.
So, yeah, and I mean, even if you're looking at a more affordable, you're looking at $65 starting price for a foamy clip.
Yeah,
with $10 upcharge for a discrete carry concept clip. So you're looking at $75 for it, and that is a heck of a price difference for the quality that you're getting. Another thing that I like about the Singleton is the fixed retention. So adjustable retention, it seems like a great concept, but for a carry holster that's living its life inside your pants, there's a lot of stuff going on there. There's friction, there's vibrations, there's sweat. There's a lot of things that can wreak havoc on fasteners. And Loctite helps, but it's not perfect.
I always get most people don't Loctite their stuff to begin with, or put Vipertite, which is what I suggest using. And I get those emails usually I don't get them from everybody, but about a year and a half in, hey, I lost my screw.
Yep.
Screw back that. And most people don't maintain their holster, don't check it regularly. It's kind of like an oil change. You have to do periodic maintenance, just make sure things are tightened down, make sure it's fine. And an adjustable retention holster has that failure point. A fixed retention holster does not. Now, the downside of a fixed retention holster is if you transition from appendix carry to 4 o'clock, you're going to have a different level of retention. You're going to have more retention at the 4 o'clock because your belt is torquing the holster more. At the end of the day, like when I was talking about the car situation earlier and you were talking about it, you need your holster to be a certain amount of secure. And there's some people, they want something where the holster, they can just slightly pull it out and draw the gun. If you have that little retention on your holster, it's not enough. Now, there's also people that have retention on the holster that is just insane and you can barely get it out. That's also a problem. You have to find that sweet Goldilocks point. And except for in some extreme situations, the fixed retention holster, you can design a fixed retention holster that will fit in that Goldilocks zone.
Yeah, and another thing that I like is the consistency. If you carry the same way every day, your draw is going to be the same way every time.
Yeah.
Again, with the adjustable retentions, you can have that screw shift. In addition to that, even cold or warm weather on the little bushing that goes in there can modify your retention. On a fixed retention holster, like you've done with the Singleton, that retention is going to be spot on the same it is until the holster wears out. And if the holster wears out,
the way we form them, any product can break, any product can have issues, etc. But the way we form them, it's a very small percentage of the time. A lot of older kydex holsters, they didn't heat the kydex up to the proper temperature and they didn't form with enough definition. So the kydex holster would wear out over time. But the way we do things, that's not really an issue.
And again, one of the design things that you have paid attention to that I've noticed in our working together is a system to keep the kydex from wearing. You pay attention to how the gun actually goes into the holster and how to bend the shapes around so that the kydex actually moves without having to be forced. Just another one of those design features that you have paid attention to that you don't see all the time.
Well, like on the SIG P320, like a lot of people may not know, and they might have changed on some of the more modern frames, but on the older frames, the top of the inside of the trigger guard is higher than the bottom of the front of the rail. So a lot of people would scan a holster, make a data, which is more in, you can probably talk about this here in a second because you know more than I do, but they would take that cloud point and then they would just convert it to a solid, split it, and then they form their holster around that. That's not the proper way to do things. So what we do is we go in, I'll scan the gun, send the scan to work, and I also send him a gun through his FFL, or he sometimes already has access to it. And then you measure it up, design it, make sure it overlays well with the scan, but you don't use the scan in the actual CAD, and you're able to de-feature the pain points.
Yeah, essentially what we end up doing. So in talking to a lot of holster makers, you'll hear them talk about using real steel to fit a gun, but you don't use it necessarily to form the gun. And so what we do is we take it and we actually design the holster around the gun. We reverse engineer the gun, we get that into CAD, and from there, we take that and we modify, we push, we pull, we add blocking in certain spots to be able to create the shape that is going to properly work with the gun. Rather than using the gun itself, we actually create the holster intently.
Yeah, there is a lot that goes into it. There are a lot of little areas in a holster that people don't think about. They think it's just mounting a clip on one part or the other, but you have tolerances you have to meet. And unfortunately, the gun dictates how we can design the holster. Like we've run into some issue with some CZs
Yep.
that tried to make some stuff for left-handed shooters, and we can't do that without compromising the design. So unfortunately, left-handed shooters will not be able to get holsters for some select guns.
Yeah, we would rather not produce the holster than put a gigantic gouge in the side of your gun.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, you know, that's a sacrifice that we're going to have to make. But I think it's also the right move to not provide a product that is going to damage or not meet customer expectations.
Yeah.
That's something that I've noticed again with you a lot is you are very intent on that finished product, very focused on getting that finished product what the customer expects.
I think I might have driven you a little bit crazy on some of the revisions on some little things.
A little bit, but it's okay.
Because there's just a lot of little fine details you have to take into account if you want to design a superior product.
I'm appreciative of the time that you actually take to do that because, again, I think that makes the product that much better in the end. It's more well thought out, and it's going to give the customers, again, especially for a sub $50 price point on the Singleton, you're looking at a holster that's had, you know, a lot of hours of, and I mean, we're working on a revision, essentially, an updated version of the Singleton, and it's not to say that the first version was bad. It's just as you wear these things, you find stuff out.
Well, and there was some stuff, there's a lot of stuff with the design that, frankly, I did not have the capability. I designed all the current Singletons you're looking at. I'm the one who did the CAD work on those. There were limitations in what I was able to do because when you start CAD, I would describe like a house of cards when you're building models. And unfortunately, with my skill set, once you get to a certain level in the design, if I wanted to go back and change something that was 3 steps back, I would untumble the entire house of cards and have to start over from the beginning. With Works knowledge, that's not as much of an issue. He can easily go back in and reinsert something, take something out. He can make minute changes without toppling the whole house.
Yeah, that's it's one of the perks of doing the job on a regular basis is you learn how the system works. You learn, there's a term that we use a lot in school because one of my other side jobs is actually instructing in CAD. And the term is design intent. And that is from start to finish, keeping an eye on how the product is made and how everything is related to itself so that as you make modifications or changes or ideology changes on what you're doing to it, you know that the changes that you make and what they're going to do and what they're going to affect kind of upstream and downstream from there. Obviously, we still run into issues every now and then, but we actually just ran into something where we needed to remove a certain feature across the board, and we got it done in a day.
Yeah.
Not too bad.
Yeah. And then like we changed up machining a material. So we had to make changes to, there was some design features on that. The material is a little more brittle, but it handles heat a little bit better as far as the mold material. So we had to make a change to a little feature on that, and Work was able to put that into the system very quickly. So a lot of little things that you've been able to help me a lot with. When you comes down to designing a holster and stuff, though, you really want to make a different product in the market that really does improve a user's experience. And that's another thing, like the expense. I don't know if a lot of people understand the expense that goes into designing something like this. I have to buy pretty much 2 guns, one to have for testing and all that, another one to go to Workman, so that you can do your stuff on the CAD end, because you have to have the exact dimensions.
Yep.
There's a 3D scanner I bought that was not cheap. You look at the number of hours that you put into each holster. That's not cheap.
Yep. And then you're cutting prototype molds of every single one, multiple
hours a piece. Yeah.
Yep.
Like when I'm going to guess, do you think it's fair to add in like just if you add in getting, and also one thing, because the House of Cards thing, it wasn't a good idea to take the previous models I had used and give them to Workmen to work with, because they were not designed with all the thought, and they can really screw up a CAD program when you don't have a properly designed base model. So we redid all the base models, and that was very time consuming.
Yep.
So I'm going to say we probably have an average of 20 hours total between machining and everything else into each holster.
Oh yeah.
Between time and my time.
Yep.
Yeah. Now, if you count the Beretta, we're probably at like 75.
We're not talking about the Beretta. We're not going to talk about the Beretta. With CAD, CAD is a relatively universal thing. Like if you can make a shape, you can make a shape. However, again, going back to that design intent thing that I was talking about before, the further you get into similar projects, the more refined your product is going to end up becoming. And the way that we look at our structures and our model trees, the way that the part was actually built, it evolves over time. And now I think we're to a good evolutionary point now where I know the process that I need to use to create what you need to be able to make your thing. But when we did the Beretta was our first project, not our first project, it was our first direct gun, and we were still building on that. So,
for example, we did the P365 and the Glock 48X or 48 MOS.
Yep.
With rail. Each of those was finalized in one revision.
Yeah.
The initial model and then one revision. And after that, the base model was perfect for both those. So, and that's like a lot of guns are very similar in shape, but then like HKVP9, there was a lot more going on there with the geometry. And I'm interested to see once we start doing some revolver stuff, you're going to have some fun with that.
I'm not sure I like the way that sounds.
You'll like it. You'll have fun with it.
I'll make it work.
I'm a little bit worried about scanning the guns, but
yeah, no kidding. So so what do we have on the horizon for Harry's Holsters?
Lots of more products, which I'm not going to mention here in a public forum, but
that's fair.
There's some cool stuff coming. Right now the Singleton's more of a budget priced holster. You're going to see something that it's going to be a lot higher price point, but it's going to provide a ton of features, and it's going to do some things better than all the other competition in the same price range on the market. So I'm really excited about that. And we've got some other simple holsters also coming that they're simple, but what they do really well. Fix a lot of issues that haven't previously been addressed. That's what I like, finding the little niches that people haven't fully executed yet and doing them, making them better than anybody else can make them.
Yeah. Well, do you have any last shticks for the viewers?
That's really about it. I mean, thanks for having me on and explaining it, and I look forward to seeing what else we can come up with.
Absolutely. So for everybody who's still here and wants to check him out, his address is harrysholsters.com. You'll find that down in the description below. You can use the coupon code WorkTheTrigger for 10% off over there. Harry, where can they find you?
harrysholsters.com. They can find me on YouTube. I haven't posted anything in a while, but that's getting ready to change. For one, having you do a lot of this design work has freed up some time. So hopefully I'll be able to get out to the range, do some more videos. You can also see me on the Lynx Defense YouTube channel every now and then. Check me out on Instagram, harrysholsters.com. I'm good buddies with Michael from Lynx Defense, and he lives only a couple hours away from me. So we do a lot together, and he makes a great product. So I've got to give him a shout out.
He does indeed. Use WorkTheTrigger over there for 5% off.
Best American-made range bags there are, period.
They really are. That's actually coming up in a video that I've got coming out really soon. So thanks again, Harrison, for joining us tonight to just talk about holsters and what your outlook on them is. And thanks, everybody, for watching. Remember, I appreciate every one of you. And until next time, do your research, get informed, and get to work.